Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Iran says it seeks a diplomatic solution on its nuclear program, but warns it will respond to any US military strike as a new round of talks is set for Geneva. Tehran calls even a limited attack an act of aggression after President Donald Trump says he is considering military options. President Donald Trump condemns the US Supreme Court after it strikes down his sweeping tariffs, saying he will turn to other trade powers and licensing authorities. In a social media post, he claims the court has accidentally and unwittingly given him greater strength and vows to use alternative tariff tools more forcefully. The killing of Jalisco New Generation cartel leader El Mencho triggers a wave of violence across Mexico, plunging some areas into chaos. The 59-year-old fugitive headed one of the country's fastest-growing criminal networks, trafficking fentanyl, methamphetamine and cocaine into the United States. US forces leading the anti-jihadist coalition are set to complete their withdrawal from Syria within a month, according to multiple sources. The United States, which deployed troops to back Kurdish-led forces against ISIS, has already begun leaving a major base in the northeastern region. French President Emmanuel Macron calls on the European Union to step up pressure on Russia and adopt a new sanctions package over the war in Ukraine. The proposed 20th round of EU sanctions has been blocked by Hungary, with talks set to continue in the coming days. Ukraine will need an estimated $588 billion to rebuild after 4 years of Russia's invasion, according to a new assessment by the World Bank and partners. The figure is nearly 3 times the country's annual economic output, underscoring the scale of damage from the war. Reform UK unveils what it calls radical plans to tackle immigration, promising a new agency to deport thousands of illegal migrants and to withdraw from human rights treaties if it wins power. The party led by Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage is currently leading in opinion polls ahead of an election due by August 2029. The Netherlands swears in 38-year-old centrist Rob Jetten as the country's youngest and first openly gay prime minister. Jetten takes power after a narrow October election victory over Geert Wilder's far-right Freedom Party. We start this hour in the United States, where the US Customs and Border Protection Agency says it will halt collections of tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The move comes more than 3 days after the US Supreme Court declared the duties illegal. CBP says it will deactivate all tariff codes linked to Donald Trump's EPA orders. However, the halt coincides with a new 15% global tariff imposed under a different legal authority. The agency has not explained the delay in stopping collections, nor clarified whether importers will receive refunds. Meanwhile, other tariffs under Section 232 and Section 301 remain in place. Joining us now to discuss Donald Trump's tariff situation is Mitali Nikore, an economist joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us. These tariffs generated nearly $500 million a day, according to some estimates, and a $175 billion figure collected in total. What foot does this put Donald Trump on currently? And what's your assessment on his new legal framework for this blanket 15% term which he has imposed since the previous one was struck down.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Thomas, for having me on the show. I think, honestly, when we look at this situation, it's just a very confusing situation for several exporters, particularly from the global south. Because if you look at the global south perspective, they should not be required to pay any additional tariffs. And in fact, the US should now be required to provide 100% refund as well as pay damages to the exporters from the global south. A lot of American entities have already started filing lawsuits with the government of the US, suing the government in many cases, suing some of the export agencies. And at the end of the day, this is going to create a flurry of lawsuits and legal activity across the world as this confusion continues on on the refunds, on whether these refunds are entitled for the period when the tariff was applied. And of course, the 15% rate is meant to make up for this $500 million figure which you spoke about. In sum, around $175 billion of tariffs have been collected by the US in the period in which the tariffs were applied, and it is hoped that this 15% will help the administration recoup and also be able to help in refunds. But honestly, there is just complete confusion across the world right now.
Indeed. And Mitali, what does this mean for Donald Trump domestically when it comes to the economy? Donald Trump has pitched his second term on these cuts versus big spends policy, where, of course, he has seen that those huge cuts from federal agencies, but has also announced some significant spending plans when it comes to a $900 billion baseline on military spending, as well as a $2 billion a year on a global health alternative, among other spending plans, of course. What does this ruling mean now that $175 billion that was incoming additional from these tariffs has now been ruled out?
Absolutely, Thomas. And this also has very serious implications for US debt, because let's not forget that US is amongst the most indebted countries of the world. Even if that debt sits as domestic debt and not international debt, it's still a massive pile of debt that they sit on. And at last count, when I checked, the debt to GDP ratio for the US was 168%. So that's almost 1.5 times the size of their economy. That's a state of the debt of the US economy. So at the end of the day, scenario, the only way to get out of that debt is to print money. And maybe the US will be forced to do that in a few years if it does not adopt policies that actually boost revenue generation. And that can only happen not through tariffs, but rather through the investment in productive sectors of the economy by creating labor productivity. And yet we see that the US continues to disinvest from social security, from education, from health, all of which makes it much more viable for people to leave the US and settle in other countries. And we're seeing that massive expatriation towards the Gulf countries, towards UK, towards Europe, which is taking place from the US. So at this point in time, the US economy, I mean, while we are not seeing those signs today, we don't see that unemployment rate today, we don't see the growth deceleration today. But apart from AI, there are very few sectors in the US economy that are actually performing and providing returns.
Mitali Nikore, thank you so much for taking the time. We could talk about that forever, but of course we have run out of it. We do stay in the Americas for our next story, and Venezuela's Foreign Minister Yvonne Gil has pressed the United States to immediately release Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores. During a speech at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Gil labelled Maduro the constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and said Washington must free them without delay. His demand came amid a deepening international crisis after Maduro was ousted in a January the 3rd US raid that removed him from office and transferred him to the US jail system. The dramatic operation has sparked protests in Venezuela, drawn criticism from allies, including China and Russia, and raised legal and diplomatic alarms about sovereignty and international law. Joining us now to discuss Venezuela is Major General Sadaka G, a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. He joins us live from Jaipur. Thank you so much for joining us. Great pleasure to talk to you. The 3rd of January seems like a long way back now, but there are serious calls now. This situation seems to have settled. The government, the interim government led by Rodriguez, seems to have built some sort of rapport with the United States, and her government is operational. The head has been cut off the snake, but the snake is still very much alive and moving, it seems, when it comes to Maduro. But these opposition figures, these individuals that are still maintaining that Maduro is the rightful leader of the country, how is the United States likely to view that, and how is Rodriguez likely to view that?
Great question. Good evening, Thomas. Thank you so much. As always, you put out very sharp and brilliant questions. And you see, USA is not going to take it too kindly, because go back in time and history, there are a number of such cases which have happened in the past. USA will do what it thinks is right. You know, might is right. There is an old saying, Thucydide doctrine, that the strong will do what it can and the weak will suffer what it must. So it will continue in the same manner. But at the same time, if you allow me, one must allow the opposition of the countries to air their views. If you stifle them, then they may turn out very violent. That will be detrimental to the national security of United States. This is my penny's worth advice through your channel. And more than anything else, 21st century, carrying out an operation as it has been done to hijack Maduro and his wife in middle of the night, and calling it as a law enforcement exercise is highly dangerous, because they can cheat themselves, but they can cheat others, but they can't cheat themselves. At the end of the day, the accountability of Donald Trump as the president will matter, and he has to do introspection. Has he done a right thing? I know it has not happened over a jiffy. It has been building up for some time. The intention was something else. However, the demonstration, the outcome as a demonstration, as demonstrated by the forces, has manifested in a different form. But I think we need to call it out in 21st century. The Cold War era, colonial mindset and the activities cannot be any longer allowed and should not be allowed if you are looking at rules-based international order. This has turned out to be so fallacious, so fictitious, so misleading, that there is hardly any rule in the rules-based international order being steered and driven by the superpower. So therefore, charity begins at home. I think diplomacy dialogue has to be respected. Sovereignty of a country has to be respected. There are different means and methods which have to be applied to bring in the rule-based law in the backyard of USA, not the way it has been actually orchestrated. Towards that end, I feel the opposition leaders and the parties are making right kind of noise. Whether it happens or not, it's a different issue. But they have a right to actually express their views. Back to thoughts.
Do stay with us as we turn over to our next story, where the United States has said that the New START is a bad deal as Russia aids expansion of China's nuclear arsenal. This comes as the nuclear treaty between the United States and Russia expired on the 5th of February of this year. New START, which was initially agreed in 2010 and extended for 5 years in 2021, limited US and Russian deployed strategic nuclear weapons arsenals. Let's in fact listen in to the latest comments coming in from the United States.
At the time of New START's signing, China had only around 200 nuclear weapons. Now Beijing is on track to have the fissile material necessary for more than 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. This threat is made worse by Russian assistance to China's CFR 600 reactors, whereby Russia is transferring highly enriched uranium fuel assemblies to the program that can produce fissile material China needs to help expand its nuclear arsenal. We could not accept an offer to maintain some of New START's central limits. Asking the United States to confine itself to bilateral limits with Russia especially while Moscow helps boost Beijing's capacity to increase its arsenal size and thereby puts upward pressure on U.S. requirements, is the definition of a bad.
Major General Sadaka G joins us once again. Just to give our viewers some context, of course, the top three in the world when it comes to the ownership of nuclear warheads. The United States has the number one power, of course, talking about 3,700 warheads in total. Russia has 4,300. China now coming up and increasing theirs at 600. Of course, Russia and China allies. Do either of those countries have any inclination, or are they obliged to negotiate with the United States, given their amount of sheer power and, of course, China's rising influence economically as well?
Great. Once again, very relevant and very sensitive issue. My take on the whole issue as a student of geopolitics, I would strongly recommend that any formulation of strategic agreement at the global level must look at the core issue on a spectrum of short, medium, and long-term goals. And as far as the new strat is concerned, we are aware of the fact, the purpose for which it was supposed to have brought down the number of warheads on the ICBMs to a particular level, 1,500 if I respect my memory, between Russia and America, to extend the scope for inclusion of China. And one assistant secretary in USA has gone on to say that why other nuclear hubs or nuclear power should not be included. He's right. He's absolutely right. But there is a method in madness to achieve the sensitive issue. That method in madness is that some low-hanging fruit, something is better than nothing. When the concept of it started with strategic arms limitation talks, and much prior to that was partial test ban treaty way back in 60s. When you join the dots, what emerges is that whatever is possible to be achieved and as a low-hanging fruit must be achieved in respect of nuclear warheads, because this is so dangerous, and the world cannot afford to resort to brinkmanship or play around with commitments and pull back from the commitments and flip-flop on such issues. It is always better that as a low-hanging fruit we go in for the agreement between Russia and USA, one, with a scope. We have a caveat in that particular agreement that all other countries, including China, also would be factored in for our long-term new strategic doctrine, wherein the whole world will be making a commitment for reduction of the nuclear warheads. It is not only America and Russia. So China also would be there, India would be there, Pakistan, Israel, even those countries who have not declared till now, but we are suspecting that they have. They also have to come overboard and declare that they have the weapon systems, because world to be a safer place in 21st century, we cannot have a nuclear weapon or warhead as a deterrent. There are much more deadly things, more dangerous than that of nuclear warheads, like what is happening. Pandemic itself, it has killed more people than the nuclear warhead, as per the history and the record has actually proven that people have killed or died. So therefore, the pandemic-like kind of threat, new threats are emerging, conflicts are actually going on. We need to bring in some kind of a method to the madness and look for some quick result-oriented kind of a mission which should be undertaken by Russia and USA at the start, followed by other countries as the time passes by. Back to you, Thomas.
This is the first time in decades, of course, we've seen no framework, no treaty between, of course, in particular, the United States and Russia since the end of the Cold War. What is the reason that why these parties, excluding China, but Russia and the United States, aren't sitting at the negotiating table? What downsides do they see to negotiating a framework for a safer future?
Great. Excellent question again. You see, there are so many. If you go through the chronology of events, you find at times, many times, Russia has proposed that let the new START be extended by 1 year. USA has turned down. Now, when you ask USA, why have you turned down? They come out with explanation of things like oceanic missiles, like Burevestnik cruise missile, by Poseidon. They have avant-garde missile, which is almost moves at a speed of 20 to 27 Mach. It's an intercontinental ballistic missile, has the capability to take a warhead. Similarly, they have another one. Likewise, from time to time, Russia has been actually developing new weapon systems and warhead. So goes with the America, which has not caught the attention or it has not been adequately publicized. And the list said about the China. So, like you have given out in the preamble, they are right. When you say that Russia is helping China, it is an ongoing phenomenon. How has Pakistan got the nuclear weapons when they did not have enough to eat? Who has helped them? America itself has helped Pakistan to have nuclear weapons. China has given the hardware. Russia, time to time, has been actively participating, which is indicative of support system. So, likewise, when you see the entire ecosystem and the behavioral matrix, lack of trust between two countries is the central factor to answer your question, which is actually making the resumption of New START a very far distant dream to be fulfilled. Back to you, please.
Major General Sadaka G, do stay with us as we turn over once again to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where the Security Service of Ukraine has stated that Ukrainian drone strikes have sparked a fire at a key oil pumping station in Russia's Republic of Tatarstan, raising fresh concerns over energy security. Regional officials confirmed that drone debris triggered a blaze in an industrial zone in Alemetsyevsk. And according to authorities, there are no casualties and no threat to residents, but emergency crews continue to battle the blaze. The target is reportedly the Kalinko pumping station, a critical hub operated by Transneft that handles nearly 30% of Russia's crude oil flows toward major export routes, including the Druzhba pipeline. Meanwhile, Moscow says its air defense systems shot down more than 150 Ukrainian drones overnight, including 3 over Tatarstan. We'll, of course, bring you all the updates coming out of the conflict as soon as we get them. Next, we turn to West Asia, where a senior Iranian diplomat dismissed speculation about a possible temporary nuclear agreement between Iran and the US, insisting that none of the circulating claims about ongoing talks are confirmed. Speaking at a press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani Bagay said speculation surrounding negotiations is not unusual, but stressed that any details of discussions remain confined to the negotiating room. Bakay also pushed back against comments by Steve Witkoff, suggesting Iran is nearing nuclear weapons capability. He described conflicting statements from US officials as nothing new and said judgment should be left to the Iranian public and regional political leaders. Joining us once again on this is Major General Sadaka G. We are heading to talks in Geneva on Thursday, something which is seen as a positive development. However, we are unsure how they are going, these indirect talks in person, as the Iranian diplomat has just said. We have had statements from Iran saying that they are willing to downscale their uranium enrichment, however not to zero as the United States wants. Also off the table is Iran changing its ballistic missile program and its support for regional proxies. What more can you tell us about these talks for Thursday? Those statements that have come out from the Iranian diplomats saying that Iran is not anywhere near weapons grade, counter to other beliefs.
Well, firstly, there are multiple parts in your question. Firstly, it is a welcome development. Very, very encouraging. And the world body must support the cause and the purpose of this particular negotiation. They must come to some kind of a achievable goalpost which can prevent this the lingering the conflict which is looming large between USA and Iran. This is first point. Second point is feasibility. Desirability for peace is there. Desirability to prevent the conflict is there. But will it actually achieve? Because Iran as such is a sovereign country, it is a civilizational power. Will it that easily succumb to pressure? So there are ways and methods to actually put across. I think the negotiators will do well when the communication ability, when you are interacting with Iran, is kept in mind to be respectful to the self-esteem of a country. Iran is not a country which can be pushed over. Neither it was in the past, nor now, nor it is going to happen in the future. More the time you give, more formidable its military inventory becomes. It is as on today, if Iran gets say browbeaten and gets bloodied, it will make sure that USA for next at least for a decade is subjected to such permanent kind of bleeding that it cannot actually bounce back as a superpower. Iran is a country which is very can be go to worst kind of extremes, and the kind of proxies it has got. And in the backyard of USA, in Venezuela itself, there are large number of Hamas. There are IRGC already present. The Hezbollah is being reported to be there in Cuba, in the Caribbean, around the Caribbean and the Cuban waters. So these are very dangerous things which are happening. And there is a dominant footprint of USA and China's naval fleets, which is increasing by the day. So America is definitely not secure in that that particular front. So therefore, a negotiated stance, as is happening, my take on the whole issue is there is a scale down from both the stakeholders, USA as also Iran, number one. Number two, the interlocutors or the middlemen or the intermediaries who are actually taking the discussion to a progressive goalpost, they have to be very careful. At the moment, there is no direct negotiation. There is a third party. So third party has to play a very important role. In the instant case, Oman is playing a very important role. They have been great peacemaker. I have been to the country number of times. I have seen them, how they operate. They are great peacemaker in this part of Middle East. So they will do a good job if they can bring about prevention of this particular conflict. Last but not the least, Thomas, that anything can happen. Today, if you are talking about downscaling of enrichment of uranium, well, from downscaled uranium, where is the guarantee? Where is the monitoring cell? This 400 kgs of uranium that we are talking of, which Donald Trump claimed that they have been destroyed. If they were destroyed, how can they suddenly prop up their head and start existing on the soil of Iran? So they have been hidden at a different place. The enrichment level is not what we think it to be. It is much higher than 60%. Weapons can be produced. If Little Boy was made with 86.6% of enrichment, I have got data from...
Okay, Major General Sadaka G, apologies for the interruption. Do stay with us as we turn on to our next story, where Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says the most important priority right now is to guarantee peace and security for the entire population of Mexico. Speaking after the reported killing of cartel boss El Mencho, Sheinbaum said the country woke up without any roadblocks. She described the situation as calm, but stressed that authorities remain focused on maintaining order. The president addressed the security situation directly, signaling that the government's immediate goal is stability and protection for citizens across the country. The International Criminal Court has begun pre-trial hearings in The Hague for the former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. The 80-year-old is facing 3 counts of crimes against humanity over dozens of killings allegedly carried out during his crackdown on drugs as the mayor of Davao City and later as president from 2016 to 2022. The indictment also reportedly links him to at least 78 murders and also accuses that authorities authorized killings and personally selected some of the victims. ICC Deputy Chief Prosecutor Mame Mandai Niang has told the court that the scale and nature of the violence created a climate where killings became systematic and competitive. Let's listen into his statement.
Mr. Duterte authorized murder and personally selected some of the targets. During the mayoral period, when he was mayor, his clearance was required for the DDS to carry out the killings. Essentially, members of the DDS needed Mr. Duterte's green light to murder.
This week's hearing is not just a full trial. It only allows prosecutors to present the foundations of their case. Judges now have 60 days to review the evidence and decide whether it is strong enough for the case to proceed to trial. Rodrigo Duterte was arrested in Manila in March last year and transferred to the Netherlands. He is currently being held at the ICC detention unit in The Hague. Joining us once again is Major General Satarkaji to discuss this. The world is looking at this case. Of course, a significant development with many other powerful, influential figures in 2026 with ICC warrants against them. We're now seeing what a case like that would look like firsthand. What's your reaction to this case? How do you think it is going to be received by the public and international players around the world?
The international justice system must hold its credentials in high platform, and they should base their judgment and decisions on evidence. Because to me, on the face of it, it appears, not only appears, it is a classical case of second Maduro. It's a Maduro in making. So Maduro was hijacked from Venezuela, from Caracas. Now this man is going to be subjected to very dangerous kinds of outcomes, which I suspect may turn absolutely against his interest. So when he is proving his innocence, he should be given a due opportunity as per the rule of law. The international law says that the accused must be given all possible opportunities to defend himself. If he has got evidence in his favor, he should be given that opportunity. It should not be ignored. That is one. Second point is that a democratic process and the legal procedures to be followed in the judiciary system at the Global Apex Organization must comply with proven and established practices. They should not do certain things merely because they are under some kind of a pressure from unknown paradigms and unknown quarters. Third and last point is, in everything of this kind that happens, there is always a hidden angle of strategic rivalry, because the national interest of a global power or superpower is not being adequately met or not being protected. Therefore, the worst kind of victims are smaller countries with weaker economy, with weak military alliances. But if they have their alliances with bigger powers, that is China in case, or Russia, then obviously they become localized and kind of an isolated target, who are pushed to be tried at international criminal court. And therefore, these kind of things must be gone into, and a fair trial must be given to the individual who is actually undergoing pre-trial activities. Back to you, please, Thomas.
Yes, Major General Satarkaji, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking to us here on the broadcast. It's always a pleasure. But that is all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.